Wait. There you are. So please help me welcome Meinders. She is with Feminist AI. It's very hard today with the IA and the AI. I'm making sure I say the right one at the right time. And so she's going to talk about inclusive AI. You've got it. And so here are your slides up. Okay. And it looks good. Okay. And then how are we doing on the light? Mic? Paul, is this still on the light? Yeah, I think that's right there. Down.
Right, hello. How's everyone doing? Great. Thank you so much for having me here, and also for allowing us to represent the community group Feminist AI. I'd like to thank Susan and Claire and the IALA community. So I'm Christine. I'm going to talk to you about inclusive AI design and community feminist AI. I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes talking to you about some assumptions in my personal journey and history in the AI design space. So when I talk about the design of intelligent or cyber-physical systems, I use the term cultural AI design. The focus of my work is to optimize for culture and transparency, not algorithms. I'd also like to note the limitations of language. I use the words inclusivity, diversity, and feminism, and understand those words have different meanings to different communities. Lastly, I am a white woman speaking about inclusivity. I have many layers of privilege and acknowledge that. When I speak, I try to represent thoughts from our diverse community, but acknowledge my own privilege. So, just a little bit about my practice and current areas. In my career, I pivoted from researching in clinical and social psychology to exploring wellness and social issues in emerging tech with an emphasis in AI. In 2016, I started researching AI from a feminist, post-humanist perspective. And at the time, most narratives in the AI space reflected a specific Western culture, and the creation of these AI systems were primarily cis men. So I looked to the broader non-tech community by Meinders to learn about AI outside of the academic space, and experience things like watching a young man with a front end speak down to a female Python developer for 12 years experience, when they were co-creating a Python game at a women's only coding event. When the topic of inclusivity came up, most of the conversations were dominated in many of these spaces, by the way. And this I'm talking about experiences from 2016 and 2017, and things are changing. But many of these conversations were dominated by men talking about how much they support women, without letting women speak for themselves or making real efforts to design for inclusivity. And I am communicating within a gender binary right now, but a lot of the conversation is really even in that kind of male and female identified space. And really, I think we see a movement to incorporate and think about a lot of these experiences of bias, specifically for non-gender conforming communities, and looking at the existence of bias in socioeconomic status, race, gender. In my own practice, I didn't want to repeat this problem from another layer of privilege, and essentially that of a white woman. So I started researching. I looked to existing literature focused on inclusivity, feminism, and post-humanism, and came across the work of Alison Adam and Catherine Hales, Lucy Sedgman, Sarah Ahmed, Dr. Rebecca Friedman, to name a few. So rather than learn about AI from the existing narratives, I I did so through a critical feminist lens, and this greatly affected how I learned about and designed these AI systems. I concluded that the best way to engage in AI design was from a critical, collaborative perspective, acknowledging bias in the design process. From this collaborative practice emerged a design philosophy and a cultural AI design tool, which I'll discuss later in this talk. Thank you for letting me kind of get through that beginning part, because I really want to talk about and frame how we're designing and thinking, and where my individual perspective comes from in our community. So today, I'll talk about the current state of AI and ask if we are in fact designing for difference. I'll share some of my personal and community research and conclude with current projects and contact information. So I'd really like to start out by sharing some of the images I've taken at AI conferences and talks over the past 3 years. And I'm just curious if you noticed anything. So I'll just kind of scroll back and just let you see. I tried to highlight the individuals presenting as women in red. And so having certain voices dominating the AI space has a tremendous effect on our products, experiences, and access. It also informs the way we design with AI. We're all aware of the unwanted bias and discrimination that can occur in AI, like image labeling. And many companies are still struggling to figure out how to respond to these problems, right? You see the interesting thing here. This is a problem, what, in 2015? This was a fix in, what, 2018? I don't think we've really gotten to a place where we're necessarily engaging in appropriate fixes. So these intelligent systems are slowly becoming embedded in our public and private lives, creating these ethical design challenges. Here's an example of predictive policing, which we know doesn't work and perpetuates discrimination against marginalized communities. And more recently, an example of an IBM and NYPD collaboration, where police surveillance is used as training data to develop a skin color search feature. Companies are slowly understanding the social challenges with humanizing and gendering products, but fail to recognize many of the underlying issues in the design process. For example, the politeness feature available for Alexa was created to teach manners to children because they were commanding their parents. Now, the focus here was fixing on a problem, a byproduct of this technology, but there was a failure to essentially kind of zoom back out and say, why do we need to gender and humanize these technologies? We see history repeating itself as AI does continue to use images like Lena, over here on the left, at an NVIDIA conference in 2018. And we see digital representations of human bias as evidenced in automated HR systems and ads. So here you can see an automated experiment on ad privacy settings, which essentially served higher paying jobs to men. Lastly, we see Kaczynski and Wang pictured above, who developed an algorithm to detect sexual orientation. Just want you to think about that for a minute. So, right now, we see companies publicly promoting diversity initiatives in AI and XR. These opportunities are often contingent on the idea that we will continue to work within a system that was not made for us, not made for our bodies. And those companies essentially want us to solve problems that they have created, right? So they pay us to reinforce problematic thinking for product-driven solutions. Through these diversity initiatives, we have to fix these problems that have been created in the AI space due to a lack of diversity. And this is an example of what I call systemic emotional labor. Now that we have a basic understanding of these challenges, let's talk about some exploratory solutions and research. So in this portion of the talk, I'll highlight participatory design approaches, the philosophy that emerged from our feminist AI community, and then I'll share my personal research from the past few years in the cultural AI design tool. So I'm going to start with participatory AI design. And I think when you start with any sort of participatory approach, you really start by giving thanks thanks to individuals who have supported and co-created the research and the projects, right? Please understand, we're not a company coming in. We're not a D&I department or division. We're created, we essentially are a response to these existing hegemonic approaches in the AI space, and we really formed because we didn't want to sit here and continually talk about the challenges and problems with bias. We wanted to show that we could actually create better products from an inclusive perspective. So when I talk about participatory approaches, I like to highlight everyone involved, and this is just a small portion of some of the people and organizations who supported us over the years. Also, a lot of the research that's happening right now in AI and XR can be traced to feminist research from the late 90s. In our work, we try to reference existing feminist narratives, many of which have never really been heard or recognized. So our community is called Feminist AI. We're a community AI design and research group that utilizes participatory approaches to engage in AI design. We create unheard voices, and those are voices left out of the conversation in the AI development and design space. So the community has been functioning for about 2.5 years, and many projects have come out of our making. We hold workshops, we prototype, we produce critical short and long-term projects. And I'm just going to go over our last 3-year-long projects. The first one was produced in 2016, and it's called Thoughtful Voice Design, right here on the left. And in this project, we explored algorithmic transparency and used AI as a design material to create voice plugins for Alexa. In 2017, we produced Intelligent Protest. And in this project, we used XR to provide access to protests for individuals who may have caretaking obligations and travel or citizenship concerns. So essentially, you could use computer vision to log in from your home computer and be present in a protest space in physical and virtual reality, right? Pardon me. We presented it to City Hall, by the way, and unfortunately they didn't recognize the avatars in the whole design space as humans. But we did try and look at and explore the idea of this kind of virtual presence. In 2018, we produced Potential Normalcy. In this project, we questioned the entire diagnostic process and used crowdsourced data to create an alternative approach to mental health diagnosis and treatment. Rather than simply writing about or changing the system from within, we used the cultural AI design tool, which you'll see very soon, to rethink problematic systems, research, and products. And so here's an example of a research prototype for Intelligent Protest, which uses community and computer vision to engage in protests with sound. And this is one of our early research prototypes. It's quite loud. Apologies. This is a machine problem. So we have predefined facial protests, and these were co-created and defined by the community members. So this is the collaborative protest. So now I'll present our philosophy. So this is the philosophy that emerged over the past few years from our community movement. Here are a few of our co-creative rules. I'm actually just going to share 6. And leave this light up for a minute or two if you'd like to see it. And also if you go to feminist.ai, it's on our website. So the first tenet of the philosophy is to design with and for unheard voices in AI creation. Another part of our philosophy is that we need to be invited to a location to co-create an AI project and research. So oftentimes you see these tech workshops and research communities kind of drop into these other locations, and they evangelize this technology, right? We don't do that. We try to work with the community we've been invited to work with and co-create our approach and process. So there's equal knowledge and value in the creation process, right? So another tenet is that all knowledge systems and skills are equally honored and valued. We want multiple entry points for involvement, so we can pull from different knowledge systems for our design and development. You don't want a bunch of tech people designing AI systems. We need to mix it up a little and incorporate different types of thinking. Pardon me, it's a little distracting. Okay. Bear with me. Okay. So we decided that the AI project can be a social response or technical making. It doesn't have to be a complete project, it can be an exploration. The material and purpose of the AI project is just as important as the data and knowledge. And we deconstruct and question every part of the process to understand the bias in existing systems. So one of the outcomes that was evident early on in my workshops was that our community was encouraged to design and think in the AI space when they felt like the AI making or prototyping could be housed in material or experiential form. So essentially when you're teaching people about AI, just simply looking at a screen and kind of code-based research and explorations is a disconnect to many people. You need some sort of physical entry point to think and understand about these processes. And now, share the cultural AI design tool. An important part of my practice is to work to define AI education by connecting art design, computer science, and industry through workshops, online, and classroom education. Here are some existing tools which explore AI development, but none of them address the socio-cultural considerations previously mentioned. Before I introduce the cultural AI design tool, I'd like to note that there's no one right way to design these systems. This is a probe to get the design community to start critically thinking about the cultural considerations and social ramifications of these designs as they permeate our culture. So here are some previous iterations of the design tool. The tool itself was created in 2016, refined significantly in 2017, and a provisional patent was filed in 2018. This year, it's the primary AI research tool for my consultancy and academic teaching. The cultural AI design tool is our methodology for engaging in inclusive and exploratory cultural design. So I'm presenting a paper version of a portion of this tool, specifically the machine learning portion. And there are two reasons I initially created the tool. Number one, people have different definitions of AI. And number two, non-tech people need an entry point into AI thinking. This tool scales and can accommodate the spectrum of expertise from seasoned developers to those new to AI. And we contract with companies, universities, and nonprofits to teach the tool or license our digital version of the tool. The cultural AI design tool creates a way for designers to deconstruct problematic assumptions embedded in AI products, develop cultural AI thinking for new product opportunities, and emphasize a participatory approach in the AI design process. In this iteration of the tool, from a concept perspective, we're deconstructing approaches to machine learning and breaking them down to we're quite liberal with our definitions, so using input data interchangeably, rules for algorithms, and so on. So much of our initial research was inspired by Dr. Alison Adam, Dr. Margaret Bowden, and Dr. Rebecca Feebrig. Now you can see the second half, arguably the most important part of the tool, in which we introduce sociocultural aspects to the structure and design of AI. Additionally, we're designing for transparency by looking at who created and organized the data, and recommend community-created data sets and data tagging. So we're also looking at who created the rules and who decided which rules to use. We explore the feedback loops between data and rules, perspective, and culture. You see, the tool can be used to create, deconstruct, and reconstruct approaches for AI. And again, our goal is to optimize for culture and transparency, not algorithms. All right, I'm going to give you a few really quick examples of the tool in action. So here's an early stage iteration of the tool, deconstructing an existing product design. So you see, in this example, a human voice is the input. An industry-specific algorithm performs sentiment analysis in the form as Alexa. The final product is an emotionally responsive voice interface. Now, I ask you, I'm just curious, do you think this is a good idea? Who wants an emotionally responsive voice interface? Anyone? Okay. Well, it's quite interesting because in some of the research, audiences were actually quite split. Some individuals were incredibly excited about this idea, and others were really quite concerned and repulsed by the idea. So in this example, the creators identified their own perspective, or they envisioned these alternative perspectives. So here, you see, this was created with technologists living in San Francisco. There's a very specific culture. The team was a cis-white tech team. And then there wasn't really a lot of transparency regarding Amazon Comprehend at the time they were researching one. An interesting note is these designers and technologists took this tool out into the community cards and found that over 75% of people from a different background found this AI proposal quite creepy and invasive. So using the tool with community resulted in more inclusive design outcomes. Here's an example of the cultural AI design tool in our last community project called Contextual Normalcy. So in this iteration of the project, we explored our thinking about feelings, our rules, form, and output. So here, you can see those elements placed within the larger mental health system. So our input, and I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail near the end, but our input was community-sourced questions and responses. We talked about finding an algorithm to find the best algorithm. So if you're gathering data from one specific location, what does that look like through the layer of supervised learning versus unsupervised learning? What does it mean to engage in classification versus clustering? So we also decided that our form could be digital or physical, and the final design output was actually across realities. And we proposed that with enough data, our output would create a new language and classification related to humans. So here we can see the elements within cultural context. The perspective is female-identified and non-binary folks around the world. The project pulls from multiple English speakers across cultures. We don't quite have the bandwidth to work across multiple languages yet. That's a goal. And our questions and rules were co-created with communities around the world. Here are a few examples of our projects in design and research settings. So these are just kind of some playful iterations. These approaches apply to interface design and more specifically to the experience of the input and interface. You can see that each iteration becomes more specific. So maybe you want to design for an interface. You know that you want to work with sound somehow. Then you say, okay, well, I'm actually going to use the design tool Weaponator. And within that, I know I can only use open sound control. Within that tool, I'd like to use the specific input. So it starts out really broad, and then as you use tools, you can figure out how narrow you want to go. And you actually don't even have to know all of the tools. You can just do a concept iteration, right? It's for designers and developers. Here's some cultural AI design prototypes from the speculative design community in San Francisco. And I'm not going to go into detail about the entire design process here, but I'd like to note that there are multiple layers to the tool. The first iteration of the tool is exploratory. Second iteration, again, becomes more focused. And the final iteration is a functional design for a product experience or system. Over the years, we've created various add-ons. And it's great because these are community sourced, right? It's one thing to work with the technology that lives and exists with a company. It's another thing to use a community-created tool to start to probe these problematic systems and look at these add-ons, these community thoughts that emerge in the design process. And it's quite interesting because you see some corporations actually try to utilize some of these approaches now. And these are things that we were designing with in 2016. Here's some more add-ons that emerged over 50+ workshops with feminist AI, speculative futures, universities, corporations, and nonprofits. And again, looking at things like, what is the level of autonomy with this system? How are we designing for privacy? Let's start to talk about proxemics in regards to cultural considerations in design and comfort level. And how are we designing? Are we designing for 3 months out, 50 years out? So here you can see the overall structure of the cultural AI design tool. First, we examine bias through the lens of history, frameworks, and culture. In this specific example, again, we're only looking at machine learning and all of the variables that contribute to the final design and how the design sits within a specific culture. I'll conclude with our participatory AI milestones and some recent projects. So we use the cultural AI design tool to research and explore contextual normalcy, which you saw earlier. In this portion of the talk, I'd like to share the approach of conducting research within our community and then co-creating a tool that addresses some of the challenges that emerge from our community. I'd also like to note and thank specific community members and corporations that actually did help us create a space to research and explore this. So our focus in developing the product contextual normalcy is that many individuals in our community felt like there wasn't necessarily a goodness of fit between their diagnostic culture and their lived experience. Very specifically, a lot of individuals talked about experiences with depression, which is quite relevant, but also some of the stigma that occurs with depression as well. So we wanted to build better tools for people living with mental health disorders around the world. And we use this participatory AI and crowdsourced data to create alternative frameworks for mental health and wellness. So our thinking talked about what it means to design for normalcy, feelings and safety across realities and cultures. We did this through one-on-one and group interviews, crowdsourced questioning, prototyping, and testing. And we started by looking at some of the problems pathologizing in the subject. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the DSM, but it's the diagnostic manual that's used here in the United States to classify and diagnose these disorders. And I think we should really not forget the history of the DSM and not forget the history of the clinical psychology overall. It's coming from a very typically cis white male perspective, right? You see kind of these approaches throughout history, and you see kind of the pathologizing of female-identified humans and the wandering nudist, of looking at homosexuality as a disturbance. And it makes you kind of wonder, why do we continue to use these tools that continue to pathologize the lived human experience? So, as I mentioned, we're using the DSM and the ICD-9 to export Western thinking about normalcy across cultures. So what's happening is a lot of international organizations are going to different countries. This Western diagnostic system is embedded in locations around the world, and so our thinking about what is normal has a specific perspective of normal that's Western-based. And here you can see more examples of assessments. And again, the apps and tools based on our diagnostic system are exploring these concepts of mental health around the world, but they're not really working for all of us, right? And they're becoming embedded in these tools. You know, you see a lot of tools that incorporate cognitive behavioral therapy, and please understand, we're knocking the existing system. We're saying we need to kind of explore beyond our existing thinking of normalcy and our existing diagnostic approaches. We should question and push what's been presented to us and filter it. So our project attempts to redefine this entire space and system. And so how can we make better tools and move beyond Western thinking about normalcy by co-creating crowdsourcing questions surrounding mental health, contrasting the DSM? And how can we use AI to discover new patterns and opportunities? So while creating the foundation for the future we want, we can also improve the design of the present. And I'm going to show you our very, very rough design. I'm a firm believer in producing quickly, iterating, getting community feedback. And so Contextual Normalcy is a participatory AI project in which we use AI to create alternative visions of normalcy. And so in this project, you can see the kind of walkthrough of the user identifying a question from the environment, and then they enter keywords. They essentially enter their response, which can be served to them in AR later. And then they identify the keywords that are relevant to them from this response. And then, you know, a little bit of microbiome research. We thought we'd ask about that. Now, this is interesting because right now, if you and I were to have a conversation, I'd tell you after the fact not to share that information with someone. And then I could say, please, don't tell so-and-so. You know, I said this. But we can't do that with our digital data, right? So we believe instead of opting in, you should have that option to attach your consent and choose what information you want tagged to what piece of data. So it's a different way to design for privacy. And again, the individual actually releases the feeling on their phone. And this is a very early version where the keywords are actually attached to the clouds. But you can kind of see this experience of where it lives and how it moves differently, let's say, once you incorporate a flocking algorithm. So what does this look like, and what is this experience like from a supervised or unsupervised learning perspective? And here, again, we haven't incorporated the sorting features, but you know, we're still in the data collection phase. So here's another, this is more visual exploration of the flocking algorithm. And again, we're trying to find these unknown patterns in our language and understanding about mental health through the actual research and design. And I went through this. So we started by making sure we were really asking the right questions with a diverse group of people. So our questions were co-created by women around the world. Our community source questions really went into these 5 main sections. And we see these questions as a starting point for our research. So once we confirm our question type, we cycle through the different keywords to look for patterns between question words and their responses. Our questions range from general to more personal ideas about how we feel. I just always like to throw in the text stack. And here's the aesthetic exploration. So we worked with designer Michelle Gong to imagine how microbes and cells could be used as a way to visualize how a feeling interacts and exists. So Michelle came up with these blobs, these amorphous shapes, designed to morph and even divide. In our design explorations, we wanted to have no preconceived ideas to what a feeling looks like, and allow the AI algorithms to affect and develop the shapes of the feeling over time. So this is really interesting, because it's also a different way to look at design. We're not designing for one product, we're designing for how a product may grow and change within AI systems with increased access to data. So rather than just designing AI first, we're looking at cultural AI first. All right, so here's some field studies. And here we explore feeling as design materials. And we asked a select group of users to imagine how they would keep or remove an emotion from within or outside of their bodies. And that really informed how we designed the movement of these blocks. And this, you know, we kind of looked at the larger questions like how do feelings move? And consider how feelings move based on physical reaction. What are the material properties of a feeling? And this is our design decisions where we put the feeling information in color and the non-feeling information in grayscale. And again, the thing that's interesting about this is it's all community tested. And we explain the privacy for. So, in our AR iteration of this exploration, and I didn't show you the VR embodied sorting, but in this AR iteration, people will place feeling blocks in physical locations to learn more about feelings in place. You can see this project. Let me just back up. What we're trying to do is use the world, humans around the world, to distribute data and thinking about data across environments. So very specifically, if you were to leave this feeling in Golden Gate Park, your feeling wouldn't be left there. The actual sentiment and spirit of the feeling, let's say purple is associated with bittersweet sadness, and bittersweet sad feeling would appear, but it would be from another country. So we actually want to use location to get the American culture to start to think differently about how we feel, and vice versa, right? So you can see in this project we use data collection, sorting, and distribution across realities with humans as part of the process. And I'm going to wrap up with some of our milestones and our most recent project. So in 2017, we presented our Inclusive Protest Project and other works from 2016 and 2017. We hosted a 2-day anti-hackathon symposium focusing on designing for inclusivity and embodiment in AI and XR. In 2018, we worked with the Feminist AI community in XR Studio pop-up sponsored by Mozilla, where we co-created and presented our project, Contextual Normalcy, Reimagining Mental Health. We'll be presenting this project at South by Southwest this March on our panel Mental Health Futures. And this year, we're going back to our original format of community workshops, prototyping, anti-hackathons, and symposia, with some amazing community, corporate, and academic partners. We'll continue to focus on inclusive design, environment, and sound. So all 3 of these events have been and are currently informed by our community and cultural AI design tool. In our current project, we're looking at new ways to understand information retrieval through audio identifiers and voice interfaces. And I'm telling you about our current project in case you'd like to be involved. So we're exploring how to use audio to design for localized AI, and we're using auditory mapping to understand when types of algorithms are being used and how to spatialize and pair them with specific ranges in tone or material sound qualities. So using our earpieces and personal devices or public audio interface, we could opt in to a location collecting data to hear what information is being collected. We're researching new ways to train our brains to engage with these conversational interfaces. So in conclusion, we know that AI has an inclusivity problem, but I'd like to acknowledge several individuals and organizations working to make this space more inclusive. So here you see AI Now, Data in Society, Kate Crawford, Safia Noble, Joy Bulamwini, Allison Adam, and Catherine Hales, Rebecca Hebring, Genevieve Bell, locally the Cyber Coding Twins, and many more. Thank you so much. If you'd like to reach out regarding our community workshops or to discuss licensing our IP, please email me. Basically, the money from our workshop goes back into our nonprofit community and funds many of the members who helped inform the cultural AI design tool and our products. I'd also like to take the time to thank our Feminist AI community, the Women's Center for Creative Work, Arts and Media Design Practices, Mozilla, and CalArts. And of course, IA Day LA. Thank you.